which have never been given before. They really try and change it up. I don't know for sure. In the room, there's only a couple of veteran JLI people in Prescott, the Tharps in the corner. I do feel like even when the which have never been given before, insiders come because you're always going to learn something interesting at these courses. They really put together a lot of interesting things that you would not have known. The next course, I found one example for that is when it came to a history course a couple years ago. A lot of people were like, well, I could put history on Wikipedia or whatever it is. I could read history on Wikipedia. And the course was just phenomenal. It was a phenomenal course, and it was not stuff you'd pick up on Wikipedia. It was real. So I hope you enjoyed today, and we're going to just get started in a second. Let me just get this guy going. All right. Share. All right, everyone see the screen? Am I good here? All right. There's supposed to be at least another person, but right here or not, here we come. Okay, let's get started. All right, welcome everybody. So we're going to turn to page 1 in the book. Let's get a book for him. They make these harder and harder to open up. No? Okay. Thank you, Ed. All right. We started. So for those of you who haven't been here before, we're going to cover a lot of information. And so if I brush you off and I say, hey, we can't do that discussion right now, please don't take it offensively. Just there's a full hour and a half of information in here, and if you converse too much, then what happens is, we won't be able to cover everything. You're going to get an email after each lesson, before each lesson, about the subject with resources, videos, different things to continue the discussion. If you want to discuss things with me privately, sometimes if I have time, I'll stay after, or you come a little early, or set up another time. Let's get started. All right, welcome to our new course, How Judaism's Universal Values Can Help Build Better Lives for Society. This course is called For All Humankind. This is actually, I see that they put here in the slideshow, this is Rabbi Moshe Kodlarsky. He was the chairman of JLI, kind of the visionary of the Jewish Learning Institute, and it's really become a big thing. There are tens of thousands of students around the world studying this right now. So much so that if you go on vacation next week, or you're in Phoenix or anywhere, you can probably find a different hub to do the next lesson. We have had people go to different islands, I don't remember which one, Virgin Islands, and catch a lesson over there. Or there was actually someone here the first time someone was in Laguna Beach and they caught the lesson over there. They aren't all fully synchronized, so it might not work out. So you can always join us virtually on Zoom, or you can watch the video afterwards. So with that, today's lesson is called The Message of Abraham. Anyone heard of Abraham? Right? Everyone is, okay, most people have heard of Abraham here. Okay, that's great. So for starters, we're going to discuss Judaism's approach to the broader global picture. Now, in order to get to that, we're going to start on page 3. We have a little exercise. We're just giving a minute for reflection. Feel free to write in your books. Feel free to do whatever you want with your books. Once you have your books, they're not mine anymore. I don't have to keep them clean or anything like that. They're yours. It's a really great thing to have good Jewish books in your house, good Torah books. So, take it home with you. If you leave it here, I can't guarantee that it'll be around the next week. I just don't know. Different people come through here. So for starters, we're going to start with a question. It's kind of break the ice. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 represents completely universal, open to all, with a message included for everybody, and 5 represents completely exclusive, private, insular, or primarily for a select group, where would you place Judaism? So we'll go around. I'd love to hear, just before we start this course, I will tell you that the question is not a simple question, and that's why it'll get you to think, and we will see the context, the answer to this question throughout the course. Anyone want to answer? What do you think?
I think
1?
1.
1? Anyone else? 4? 4? So why do you say 4? And
3. Oh, actually, I meant, I'm sorry, I meant 2.
2. Why do you say 2?
Because there are some things in Judaism that are exclusive to Judaism, certain rituals and all that, which would make no sense for somebody else. But a huge amount of what we find in Leviticus and Exodus, as far as social equality and all that, are universal.
Anyone want to answer who said 1? 1?
Well, I agree with what he's saying, because we know so many people that are Christian that have already, I don't think they could accept Judaism. They're so Jesus and so convinced.
All right, so okay. Anyone else want to add? Anyone who said 1 want to add? It's fine, because I'll tell you, we're gonna dig through the subject here. Don't worry, we're gonna get through the subject here. Anyone else want to add? Yeah.
Well, I'm a Christian, and I'm just so happy to be here, and I love the Old Testament, and I think it's the foundation of humanity.
All right. Well, Natalie, want to add to it?
I'd say 5.
5.
Because of the stuff the Jews have contributed to make the world a better place.
All right. Well, so we're going to get into it. We're going to dig into it now. So the truth is it's very hard to explain. On one hand, Judaism does have a lot of exclusive mitzvahs. Go and try and explain how meticulous we are not to have chametz before Passover to someone who's not Jewish. It's impossible for them to understand. Or kosher, for example. Kosher, right? That's such a different... There's so many mitzvahs. I mean, there's 613 commandments in Judaism, which are very, very exclusive to Jewish people. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, there were 2 Israeli guys who were in Northern California, 2 rabbis, and they ended up in prison. So they called they came out of prison, and they made like a little festive kind of celebration type thing. And here was the story. They were 2 guys who came from Israel. This is before, Google Maps and everything like that, to fundraise for a certain organization. Now, anyone know what the Mossad means? Anyone know what does Mossad mean?
What does it mean, or what is it?
What does it mean? Okay, so Mossad means organization. That's what it means. It's an organization. In Hebrew, we're a Mossad. Mossad, the nickname of the Mossad is the secret intelligence in Israel, right? That's the organization of intelligence. But if you have like a yeshiva or a synagogue, it's also or a charity, it's a Mossad. So these guys come, and they're keeping Jewish law. It's not like nowadays where you get plastic knives everywhere. They needed kosher knives. They bought 2 big kosher knives. Why did Jewish people need 2 kosher knives? They need for milk and meat. You can't use the same knife for both, right? Anyways, they got these 2 big knives they bought, but you can't use them if you're Jewish until you dip them into natural waters. So they're in the bay over there, in one of the bays over there, so many over there in Northern California. Middle of the night, late at night, they finally arrive. They finally want to eat something, and they're dipping their knives in the water. Lo and behold, these guys don't speak a word of English. The police come, and you see these guys with 2 big knives in the middle of the night. Give me some ID. They give their ID, their visa, to come to the United States, and they're coming under Mossad. These are secret spies. Right now, really it said probably something like Mossad of Soup Kitchen or something like that. They came to fundraise in the United States for some charity in Israel. Anyways, they say, these guys are in the Mossad, they got these big knives. They start looking through this stuff and they see a map with an X on it. Oh my gosh, they call up the person on that address. Do you know these guys? I have no idea who they are. These guys are going to go murder this lady in the middle of the night. They're from the Mossad. Anyways, these guys get arrested, they get put in prison. They say, what's your name? One guy says, my name is Feld. The other guy says, my name is Peld. Now in Hebrew, Fe and Pei, those 2 sounds are interchangeable. And so when you're translating into English, sometimes F has an F sound, sometimes it has a P sound. Anyway, they say, yeah, we're brothers. You guys don't even have the same last name. You can't be brothers. Right? So they arrest these guys. Anyways, they call a rabbi who speaks Hebrew. And the rabbi says, oh my goodness, he bursts out laughing. He says, these guys are brothers. They came under some charity. Some guy in Israel said, oh, you're going to Northern California. My daughter lives there. Visit her. Here's a map. Visit her. Send her my regards. They came, they bought 2 big knives because they need to eat. They got to dip them in the waters because that's Jewish law. And they let them out right away. And that was a story where Judaism does have exclusiveness, which is difficult to explain. Now, every Jew has this. Every Jew has this. Jews who don't have it means they're not keeping it enough, right? Because there are mitzvahs, there are commandments from God, which are so important. They're so important from God, and they don't make any sense. And on some of them, God's even proud of them. He says, do it, and it doesn't make sense. You're going to do it anyways, right? So on one hand, Judaism does have this exclusivity. Now, that perception is actually quite a bit in the Torah. So, you have different things in the Torah. We'll read soon, like my treasured nation. So we'll get right to it. Text 1a if you want to start, Beth. And if you don't want to read, just say pass. We're going to go around. Everyone's got a chance to read. Start on page 3 if you could read text 1a in English. If you really want it in Hebrew, but everyone prefers in English. All right. We want to read, Bill, you want to read text 1a? Want to read text 1a?
Oh.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. In today's world, there are questions of inclusion and exclusion dominate discussions. The subject
Oh, no, text 1a. Text 1a. Don't worry, you'll get to. You have a text 1a on page 3.
Moses went up to God, and God called him from the mountain, saying, this is what you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel.
Go on. Huh?
You yourselves have been what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. And now if you will listen to my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured nation from all the peoples, for the entire earth is mine. And you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. There are words you shall speak to the children of Israel.
So here you have the introduction before the Jewish people get the Torah at Sinai. Pretty big introduction here. God tells the Jewish people, you saw what I did. I took you out on eagle's wings with the compassion and the fierceness of an eagle. And I took you out so you should be in my covenant, keep my commandments. You will be my treasure, God says. And then he says, I will make you a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So here God singles out the nation. He says, you're my treasured nation. He's talking specifically to those who experienced Exodus, right? He says, I took you out of Egypt. You're the ones, right? Here you have God talking that way right here. Let's go on, text 1b. If you want to read text 1b, short one. Want to read text 1? Yeah, 1b.
You went to what page?
Page 4.
Okay. I am your God, who took you out of Egypt from the house of slavery.
So here you have the beginning of the 10 Commandments. God says, I am your God. He's speaking singular. He's speaking to the Jewish people who are there, who took you out of Egypt. And he's giving us how many mitzvahs at the 10 Commandments? He's giving us 613. The first 10 of the 10 Commandments. He's giving the mitzvahs. He's saying, I took you out of Egypt. These are your commandments, right? So here you have another term of exclusivity. Then we have another one, text 1c. You want to read text 1c?
The Torah that Moses commanded us is the heritage of the community of Jacob.
Then you have in Deuteronomy, God says the Torah is the inheritance of the Jewish people. So on one hand, this is like big 5 stuff, right? God is being very exclusive to the Jewish people. Now, with that, we're going to get into the exclusivity of Judaism, as discussed by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. I know some of you heard of him, some of you may have not. He was a chief rabbi in England, a very exceptional orator and writer. He was able to bring down really deep concepts into writing. We're going to read text 2.
Jewish law imposes a code of difference. Jews are not to be like all the nations. Internally, this was a source of pride expressed in Balaam's blessing. It is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned among the nations. Externally, it was a source of resentment caught in Haman's complaint to Ahasuerus. There is a certain people scattered and dispersed, whose laws are different from those of any other people.
So here you have what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs calls the code of difference. So on one hand, you have, the fact that yes, Jewish people are different, right? And they are commanded by God. Supposed to be a sense of pride. God said, "You're my treasure," right? Sense of pride. In the Torah, we find that the prophet, the evil prophet, Balaam, says, "You guys are different." And he's saying it as a blessing, as a sense of pride. At the same time, you have Haman. He goes to Ahasuerus, and he says, "There are these people, they're different. They don't work on the Sabbath, right? They're different." And he uses that for suspicion and resentment. So this is what we have, this code of difference. On one sense, it's a sort of pride. On the sense, it's a source of resentment. Now, here we have something really, really interesting. So now getting into that, it sounds like Judaism is a members-only club, right? Now, let's take it a step further. Does Judaism welcome converts? What do you think? Does Judaism welcome converts?
Yes.
Well, we're going to see. It's actually a little tricky. Read text 3a. Who just read just now? All right, let's go back there. Yeah. 3a. Wait, who just read? You did. Okay, back row. All right, let's go.
What is the meaning of that which is written? He who serves as a guarantor for a stranger shall suffer evil. This means evil after evil will befall those who accept converts.
So here we have the famous King Solomon say, boy, if you accept converts, it's not going to end up good, right? So what does that mean? I mean, surely some of us know that converts are accepted in Judaism. So this could be difficult to understand. What is King Solomon saying? Well, luckily the commentators, Tosafos on that excerpt in the Talmud, quotes and adds in text 3b, on page 6.
Evil after evil will befall those who accept converts. Rabbi Yitzhak said this refers to instances where non-Jews are encouraged to convert if they are accepted too readily and immediately. However, if they demonstrate a genuine and earnest effort to embrace the faith, we are obliged to accept them.
So here, the Talmud, the Tosafos, who's a famous medieval rabbi in France, he explains, King Solomon is talking about people who haven't tried hard and haven't taken time to become Jewish. He's talking about people who have just been accepted easily. But if someone's sincere and they work hard, then of course we accept them. A lot of Jewish people are famous converts in the Bible and Jewish history, right? So actually, there's actually an interesting story. There was this fellow who was here visiting for Passover a couple years ago, and he was a convert, Orthodox convert. He lived in New York, and he actually had a fancy restaurant. And he was visiting here. He came here kind of on vacation because his restaurant wasn't open on Passover. And he came here, and anyways, he had an interest. He was Puerto Rican. Very interesting story of conversion. He was coming to services here. So I asked him, I said, what's your advice to people who want to convert to Judaism? So he said, advice number 1, when you want to convert, you're going to call the rabbi, and he's going to answer the phone, and he's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I'll call you back. He is not going to call you back. That's advice number 1. He said, not because anything wrong. He's just busy. He's just busy. He means well. He's not going to call you back. And if you do not keep trying to call him, it's not going to happen. So, Tosafos explains, King Solomon is talking about people who don't have persistence and they don't have the true sincerity. But if someone has the persistence and the sincerity, then yes, in Judaism, we welcome them. All right, so this is the side that Judaism is quite exclusive, members-only club. And, we don't accept converts unless they push the door really hard. Otherwise, we don't accept them. Now, this could be interpreted as Judaism be unwelcoming, exclusive, sheltered. Having validating that, we're going to take another side, and that's what this course is about. What if the idea of separatedness isn't only the whole story. What if there's a larger universal vision? Number one. And number two, what if from its very beginning, Judaism has a revolutionary message to all humanity? And that's what this course is about. That's our intro to this course. Judaism definitely has the exclusive side. I'm in that business. But Judaism also has this revolutionary message to all humanity. And that's why this course is called For All Humankind. In fact, we consider it a universal responsibility, but also we consider it a very, very important idea of core beliefs that will make humanity flourish. So to get started, to better understand this, we're going to have to go into Jewish history, the history in the Bible, and understand the biblical narrative. So first and foremost, let's go back and we're going to talk about Noah. Everybody heard of Noah? Yes. Noah and the great flood, right? So Noah was living in a world of tremendous corruption, the Bible says. Tremendous corruption. And God tells Noah, he says, go and build a teva, build an ark, and save your family. And we're going to go and dive into the details. If you could read text 4.
Noah found favor in the eyes of God. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God.
So here you give Noah. It says in the Torah, Noach matzah chen b'einei Hashem. Noach found favor in God's eyes. You have this terrible generation of corrupted people. There was one guy, Noach. Noach actually literally means consolation. He consoled the generation. God goes to Noach and he says, Noach, there's going to be a great flood. I want you to build an ark that's going to take how many years to build? 120 years. Noach lived to 950, so that's not so long, right, in his life. 120 years, Noach is going to build this ark. And he's hammering this ark in the middle of the desert, right? And nobody comes and says, well, how are you going to get this? People come and they say, how are you going to get this to the water, right? How are you going to get this cruise ship to the water? And Noach says, well, God's going to make a great flood and wash everyone away. Anyways, what happens is people stand up and they say, oh, we don't believe in the flood, or we're too tall for the flood, or come on, we know science, this is never going to happen. And it floods and they're all washed away. Only Noach and his family survive. And they live on to create humanity as we know it today. We all come from Noach's family, right? Because everybody died out. So here we got this graphic of Noach. Noach.
The screen's gone.
Oh, the screen's not on the whole time?
No.
Just a second. All right. Just give me 1 second.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. Okay, that's on. This is on. That's on.
There it is.
All right. Let me do that graphic again. That was an important one. All right. Oh, is that on?
It's on.
Okay, so let me just share the screen again. Okay. There we go. Okay. So here comes their question. We got this Noach guy, great guy. God saves humanity for his family. Why do we not consider him the father of the Jewish people? Who do we consider the father of the Jewish people? Anyone know? Abraham. So why is Noach not considered the father of the Jewish people? So the answer comes several generations later when we start comparing Abraham to Noach. Now, this is a long reading, but for starters, Noach was focused on his own survival. We're going to see what happens with Abraham when the same story happens. God brings corruption to Abraham, and he says, Abraham, I'm going to destroy these cities. And what does Abraham do different than Noach? And this is a big core idea of Abraham. We're going to read text 5. It's a long text from the Bible. If you want to pass, you can pass. Also, sometimes, if it's a long text, I'll cut you off, and I'll say next person, just so we share it. Would you like to read it? Text 5 on page 10.
God said to Abraham, the outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah has grown immense, and their sin is very grave. I will descend down and see whether their actions truly match the outcry that has reached me. If they do, I will bring destruction. If not, I will know what to do. Abraham approached God and said, will you also destroy the righteous together with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who live there? It would be beneath you to act in such a way, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, treating both alike. Far be it from you, shall the judge of all earth not act justly. God replied, if I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire region for their sake. Abraham answered, behold, I have dared to speak, my Lord, though I am but dust and ashes. Perhaps there are 5 fewer than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of fire? God said, I will not destroy it if I find 45. Abraham continued, perhaps 40 will be found there. God answered, I will not act for the sake of 40. Abraham said, please let my Lord's anger not flare up as I speak. Perhaps 30 will be there. God replied, I will not do it if I find 30. Abraham said, behold, I have dared to speak to my Lord again. Perhaps 20 will be found there. God said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, please let my Lord not be angered, and I will speak just once more. Perhaps 10 will be found. God responded, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10.
All right, so here we got the story. We know what happens. They don't find 10. And God destroys all 4 cities over there, right? However, we see something interesting about Avram. Let's stop for a second. Now, I want to tell you a word in Hebrew. One of the things at the beginning of the conversation is the Torah uses the word vayigash. Vayigash. It means, and Abraham approached. He approached. Now, that word vayigash actually in Hebrew means, it's translated as he approached, but it means usually, and he approached for battle. Abraham came, he's going to argue with God, right? Argue with God. That's a pretty daunting thing to do, right? And he goes and he argues with God. God is the omnipotent, the creator of the universe, and Abraham steps forward as a warrior, right? That's what the Torah implies. Why was he doing that? Now, Noach was very righteous. The Torah says he was tzaddik tamim, he was completely righteous. However, Abraham had a different characteristic than Noach. Noach was righteous, but Abraham was concerned with others. He was concerned with others, and that's what Abraham was standing for. And he argued with God that they should save the wicked inhabitants on behalf of the righteous ones that are there, right? That's what God wanted, that's what Abraham wanted God to do. So his care even extended to the non-deserving, and that was critical. That's a critical detail about Abraham's righteousness. Noach, in the end of the day, he was righteous and he followed God. But he didn't go out to try to get the other people. In fact, he barely did what God said to do, right? God said, build it for 120 years, get people to come question it, etc., etc. Maybe they'll follow you. But Noach wasn't concerned with them. He didn't say, God, how do I get them? Please save them. Noach said, okay, you destroy the world. That's just. They're all corrupt. That's just. And I'll go. Abraham was concerned even with the corrupt. He said, God, let's find a way to save them. Now, why was God, just before Abraham starts talking with God, God tells him why Abraham is so cherished. Why is Abraham so cherished? What is the reason why he is so cherished to God? Let's take it a step further. We're going to read text 6 on page 13.
Yes. I love Abraham because his commitment to guide his children and followers to follow God's path and uphold righteousness and justice.
So Abraham was concerned with others. And this is what he was so cherished to God, that he was looking after. He wanted his family and followers to extend his beliefs. He wanted them to be transmitted. Abraham's legacy in this verse is tzedakah, righteousness. Now, tzedakah in Hebrew always means, people always translate tzedakah as charity. But really, the etymologists say tzedakah does not mean charity, because charity means you have something and you give some to someone else. Tzedakah means righteousness. When you give charity to someone, it's really God's, and it belongs to the other person. And you're just putting it in the right place. You thought it was by you, but really, God put it by you to give it to someone else. That's what righteousness means. So Avram taught tzedakah to his children, and also justice. These are two universal ideas which are the core of humanity. Now, in the previous section, we mentioned how Avram had compassion to others, and Noah did not have. Noah did not have compassion to others. He didn't only feel others, but he felt, I need to teach them righteousness and justice. Tzedakah u'mishpat. And that's why Avram is known as the first Jew. He's somebody who not only lived it for himself, but he actually said, I'm going to extend it to my family and beyond, these values to my family and beyond. Now with that, we're actually going to go into a little bit deeper. Now in Judaism, we have what are called the 7 Noahide laws. And that we're going to bring in text 7a. Text 7a, you just read, right? Text 7a. Yeah, go for it.
God commanded Adam concerning 6 matters. He forbade idolatry, cursing God, murder, illicit sexual relations, and theft. And he instructed him to establish a judiciary. To Noah, God added another prohibition, consuming a lamb torn from a living animal.
So these are the 7 commandments. Actually, 6 of them were given to Adam. 6 of them were given to Adam. The 7th was given to Noah. They're called the 7 Noahide laws. We have these little memes for them. You can see them here. And actually, as children of Abraham, the Jewish people are meant to teach these values to everybody, to all humanity. These values are the core of morality for humanity. These 7 commandments. Now, we just said, how many commandments did Jews get from God? Anyone remember? 613. We got 630 commandments. Why do we need to concern ourselves with humanity keeping the 7? So the answer is, as descendants, spiritual and physical descendants of Abraham, just like Abraham knew, and God cherished Abraham because he knew that he had to change the world universally. He had to bring universal values to the world, and that's what God cherished about him. We as Jews have that responsibility as well. And this is text 7b, if you want to read text 7b.
Moses relayed the divine command to ensure that all inhabitants of the world accept the Noahide laws.
So here you have, that was a quote from Moses Maimonides. And Maimonides says, Jewish people were at Sinai. They actually got the 613 commandments, but humanity got 7 commandments at Sinai. And Jewish people, one of their jobs is to help spread those commandments to all humanity, those 7 commandments. And really, all humanity needs to keep them. And all humanity needs to continually spread these 7 values. Now that sounds pretty simple. Only 7 commandments, right? Sounds pretty simple. Well, the truth is those 7 commandments, they're like core commandments. And they actually have a lot of details in them. And we're going to see some of them. Now, I just want to mention at this course, we are not going to go through all the details of the 7 commandments of Noah, but we're kind of going to go through the values and the ideas behind them, the core ideas and values behind them. That's what this course is. If you want to read further on it, there's a lot online about Noahides and the idea of the 7 commandments of Noah. But it's not just 7. We'll continue. We want to read text 8. This is the Sefer HaChinuch. This is a medieval commentary from the 13th century. And this is what he writes.
Do not be misled by the number 7 when it comes to the Noahide laws, even though this number is well known and cited in the Talmud. These 7 laws are not 7 isolated commands, but 7 broad categories encompassing many specific laws. For instance, the prohibition of illicit sexual relations is counted as one Noahide law, yet it includes many distinct prohibitions. Likewise, the prohibition of idolatry is a single law that contains numerous details
and the prohibition of theft covers all conduct that leads to theft, such as coveting.
So here we have from the text in the Chinuch, we just brought out 3 points. Number 1, there are 7 universal commandments from God which apply to all humanity. Number 2, Jewish people have a responsibility not just to keep their own laws, but to make sure humanity knows that. It has to be shared universally. And number 3, these 7 laws, these are kind of the scaffold of civilization. When these 7 laws are kept, civilization can thrive morally. But when they're not kept, civilization will fall. Now it's clear that, we asked a tricky question in the beginning. On one hand, Judaism has this exclusive side. On the other hand, Judaism has this universal mission and universal side, going back all the way to Noah. But really going back to Noah or Abraham. I mean, Noah had it, but he didn't spread it. Abraham had it, and Abraham spread it, and that's why God cherished it. Now, actually, there's even more to it. Not only is this a value for humanity to keep society thriving, and not only is this a commandment to Jews to help spread, however, there's even spiritual reward promised for people who keep it. We'll read text 9. Very interesting rule.
Anyone who accepts these 7 laws and observes them is counted among the righteous of the nations and has a share in the world to come.
So here we have Maimonides. We're going to talk about this in lesson 2 and 3 as well. But Maimonides says anyone who keeps these commandments not only will live a good life in this world, but he will actually have a reward in the world to come. So this is actually totally outside of the framework of conversion, right? All humanity has this spiritual reward placed in the world to come. So to go back, Jews don't proselytize, right? In fact, if a convert really wants to do it, if a convert wants to convert, we might not answer his phone. We might say, call me back. Not on purpose, but that might just happen. Jews don't proselytize. But at the same time, do we have a universal message? Does the Torah have a universal message? Absolutely. And this is actually why we don't proselytize. The reason why Jewish people do not proselytize is because we don't believe Judaism is an idea which is for everybody or better than. We believe that Jews have this mission to be Jews. And all humanity has universal message to connect to God with the 7 Noahide laws. And as we'll see, the 7 Noahide laws are not so simple, and these are actually deep, deep values, core principles in humanity to live fully spiritual and physical lives imbued with purpose and mission. So, this is kind of like if you have a doctor, right? So I remember one time someone told me a long time ago, there was an elderly doctor here. He said, doctors today are different. He said, when I was a doctor, we used to go to conventions, and everyone was talking about how to help people. They'd say, boy, do you know this medication or this theory? You get to know them. He said, nowadays, doctors, you go to the conventions, they're all talking about how to get more money from insurance and how to this and how to work out your business ethics this way or that way. So, here we have it. Jewish people in the Torah are kind of like doctors. And they're supposed to spread the universal law to humanity. Now, it would be ridiculous to say, hey, I'm a doctor. Do you guys want to become doctors also? We make a killing, right? Or whatever it is. A doctor's job isn't to make other doctors. A doctor's job is to heal people. And this is how Judaism works in the Torah. There is Judaism for Jewish people, but we believe that there's a universal mission which is part of creation, which is from the beginning when God created to imbue in the world these universal values, godly values. Any questions so far?
No.
Yeah.
The only question I have is about that last, number 7, consuming a living life from a living animal.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm not going to get into the details so much, but there is a universal value there of being cruel to animals for no reason. So now, being cruel to animals for no reason, an idea of being cruel to animals for no reason, in Judaism you are allowed to eat meat, you're allowed to, use animals for good purposes, but that one is underlying, you're not supposed to be cruel to creations, cruel to creation. So if you have a reason you need the leather or something like that, kill the animal so the animal should not suffer, right? And then you can use out the product. Okay, so now we're going to get into this a little bit deeper. So first and foremost, for this course here, we're going to first understand how the message starts at home. In order to share universal values of the world, you have to really understand them and believe in them yourself, right? If you go to someone and say, do this or do that, we know in the world, everyone follows by example. Ultimately, the greatest way of education is by example. And in order to fulfill the Jewish responsibility to humankind, which Jewish people want to extend, in other words, they want everyone doing this, you got to understand them yourself. So in order to do that, we are going to deep dive into these ideas, but we're also going to learn the core moral DNA of civilization, which exists in these 7 Noahide laws. And when we understand these values, which generally subdivide into life, truth, property, and justice, right? And when we get these ideas, we will be able to grasp them for ourselves and actually radiate them into the world. Now, this idea is underscored by one of the famous rabbis in the 13th century, Rabbi Menachem Meiri. And here's what he says, something which is really, really interesting. Text 10. Where are we holding? Who just read? Who just read? You just read? Oh, she just read. Okay, yeah.
Anyone who engages in the study of the 7 Noahide laws, their principles, their details, and their applications, in which most of the Torah's core teachings are contained, is worthy of great honor, even as much as the high priest himself.
All right, so here the Meiri, who was a famous rabbi in the 13th century, he says actually 2 striking things. He says somebody who engages in the study of 7 Noahide laws is worthy of great honor like the high priest himself. Now the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, is the holiest Jewish position in the holiest place in the Holy of Holies on the holiest day of the year. And when he says this idea of the 7 Noahide laws, they carry them sublime, deep, core, holy Torah values. Point number 2, he says most of the Torah's core teachings are in these values. So it's true we have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, and these are only 7. But when we dig deeply into these, we can see core values of Torah in them, and understand the Torah greater even for ourselves, and understand how to capture the Torah's essence. So our first obligation in this course is to study the values and study the core ideas. If we don't appreciate them, we can't spread them. A lot of people in this world live lives where they're able to get by morally, materially. However, they're not radiating holy ideas. Life isn't about getting by. It's about living with higher purpose and sharing higher purpose. So when we learn these and understand them for ourselves, we'll be able to live greater lives. We'll be able to spread it. And hopefully after this course, we'll say, boy, how could we not spread it if we have such deep values? So if we appreciate these values, it's impossible not to share them. So we're going to get into the values here, and we're going to start on page 19. Now, before we get there, we're going to in this course, we're going to explore the 7 values, the 7 commandments, the 7 laws. And we are not going to go through again all the details of them, because there are details. It's like, let's say in the olden days, people were challenged. There was no refrigeration system. They were challenged. If you can cut the animal off your goat and eat it, then the next leg will be fresh next week, right, if the animal's still alive. And God said, no, you can't do that, right? You can't do that. You got to kill the animal. Nowadays, we are not challenged with that. We have modern refrigeration. We can freeze all the meat and everything like that. But we might be tempted to be cruel to animals in a certain context, right, for no reason. So we're not going to go through the details of the law in this course. In the appendix, there goes through some of the details. In each lesson, there's a wonderful appendix. However, we're going to go through some of the core values and see how important they are and really how deep they are. They're very, very deep. All these commandments have a lot of depth and understanding the essence of what God wants in this world. So for today, we're going to go through an important one. Belief in God. Now, the fact it's the first one of the 7 means it's probably pretty important, right? Probably pretty important to believe in God, for humanity to believe in God. We're holding on page 19. Now, in order to get to that, in order to understand the importance of belief in God and what it truly means, which might be surprising for people today here in the room, what it truly, truly means, to understand what it means belief in God, we're going to go back to the story of Abraham. where there were major transitions in the world. Now, in that time, Abraham, we know, he looked at the stars and the idols, and he said, boy, who made all this? Who's in charge of all of this, right? And we're going to go through that story. Avram was born in Ur-Kasdim, which is in Mesopotamia, and there was tons of idols. So much so, Avraham's father, Terach, which actually there's a great 3D kids movie which follows Jewish tradition, very few of those. Goes to the Jewish traditions, it's called Young Abraham. Avram's father owns Idol Mart, right? He owns an idol store. It's like the Walmart of idols. And here, this is the family business. They sell gods. They sell gods. And the Rambam tells us a very interesting story about Abraham. And I'll go through some of the details. We don't have full time. But the Rambam tells us a wonderful story on wonderful things about Avram. Text 11 on page 19. I think we're holding a Natalie.
As soon as Abraham, this mighty soul, was weaned, he began to think on his own. Even as a young child, his mind would wander and question by day and by night. He had no teacher and no one to guide him. He was mired among the foolish idol worshippers of Ur-Kasdim. His father, his mother, and everyone around him served idols, and he too would join them. Yet his heart kept searching and his mind kept probing. Eventually, he discovered the true path, and through his own sound reasoning, grasped what was right. He came to understand that there must be one God who created everything, and that among all that exists, there is no other God but him.
So while everyone's investing in Avram's family's business, and everyone's enjoyably going around and serving idols, Avram's secretly questioning inside. He starts questioning things, says like, well, if this idol was made yesterday, who made the person who made it? That must be God. Avram's asking these questions, which are almost not accepted in society, right? And it's going to hurt the family business. Avram discovers a creator, and this is how the story goes. He discovers a creator, and we're going to go into the story in a little bit more detail with text 11b.
Sarah was an idol maker and salesman. He once went out and left Abraham in charge of the shop. People would come in to buy idols, and Abraham would question them. How old are you, he'd ask. 50 or 60, they would reply. You poor fellow, Abraham would exclaim. Imagine that, a man of 60 bowing down to something made yesterday. Embarrassed, the customers would turn around and leave. A woman came in carrying a bowl of fine flour. Here, she said, offer this before them. Abraham took a stick, smashed all the idols, and placed the stick in the hands of the largest one. When Terah returned and saw the destruction, he demanded, who did this to my idols? I must be honest with you, Abraham replied. A woman brought an offering of flour. When I set it before them, they started fighting. One said, I'll eat first. And another said, no, I will. The biggest one got angry, grabbed a stick, and smashed them all. Are you mocking me, Terah asked. Terah cried. You know they can't think or move. Abraham answered, listen to your own words.
Wow.
So here, this is a story, ancient story, quoted in the Jewish Midrash. It's a great story, and I remember as a child always. But here Avram goes, and he starts realizing that there's only one God, and these idols are all fake. And everybody else knows it as well, right? And he goes, this story here, but he doesn't just leave it there. Abraham goes on to change the whole generation. Not only does Abraham become a monotheist himself, he says, no, I have to spread this to society, and even risk his life probably destroying his father's business. So here we have Avram destroying the idols. Now we're going to go and we're going to continue in Avraham's story on text 11c. Yeah.
Once Abraham recognized and understood the truth, he began to challenge the people of Ur, him, debating with them, and showing that their way was false. When his arguments prevailed, the king sought to put him to death. But a miracle occurred, and Abraham escaped to Haran. There he began to call out with a mighty voice to all humanity, teaching that there is one God. and that he alone is worthy of worship. He would travel from city to city and from kingdom to kingdom, proclaiming this message and gathering followers wherever he went. As people assembled around him and questioned his idea, Abraham would explain according to their understanding, guiding them step by step until they came to recognize the truth. In time, thousands and tens of thousands joined him. These were the people of the house of Abraham, in whose hearts he firmly planted the great principle of faith.
So here we get the story. Avram has no budget. He has no marketing firm backing him, but he goes and he starts transforming the region to believe in one God, right? Now, Avram in the Torah is called Avram HaIvri. Now, modern Hebrew is called Hebrew, comes from the word Ivri. Why is he called Avram HaIvri? Now, we find his name actually called Ivri later on in his life in the Torah. Why is he called the Ivri? So we're going to see, very interesting in the Midrash, it explains on text 12 on page 23.
A fugitive reported to Abram the Hebrew that Lot had been taken captive. Rabbi Yehuda said, Abraham is called the Hebrew because the entire world has on one side and he was on the other.
So Avram's called the Ivri because he stands up to the whole world, and then eventually he spreads it to the whole world to become monotheists. So this is our idea of Avram. This is our first mitzvah of believing in one God. Now here comes the question. We live in modern society today. How relevant is Avram's message that we need to believe in God? How relevant is it nowadays? I mean, do we know on one God? Do we know anyone know people walking around with idols in their pocket? We don't have an idol mart in Prescott. There might be some places in the world, but it's pretty rare. A lot of the Western looks at it like this is like savage and paganism from previous generations. So how relevant is it to teach this mitzvah? Number one, that's point number one. Question number one. Especially in the Western culture. I mean, in Western culture, either people believe or they don't believe, right? They believe or they don't believe. But how relevant is it important to say, well, there's only one God? Furthermore, why do we need to say there is one God? What if there's many? As long as people are believing in something higher, why does there only need to be one God? Who cares if there's many in society, right? So now we have page 24. Why does Judaism place such an emphasis on being one God? Now, I want to just note, there are a lot of people who don't believe in God. They're called atheists or agnostics. They're not idolaters, right? They're not idolaters. They're atheists or agnostics, right? So we have this idea, why do we have such an emphasis that there needs to be one God and no idolatry? I mean, we're not challenged with idolatry nowadays. We don't have idolatry. So question, why does Judaism place such an emphasis on there being one God? How does this simplify or complicate our understanding of the world and our place in it? Now, so as we'll see, monotheism isn't about math, right? It's not about mathematics. There's only one God. It's actually a very moral, important idea that there is one God. But before we have to do that, we're going to have to step back to the history of the world that Avram was born into. Avram was born into a society that was selling and idols and bowing down to idols, and everyone had a few. But how did it come about? Now, we like to look back and say, wow, idolatry is like so prehistoric. Bunch of idiots who don't have science and don't have Western culture. But the truth is it was quite a complicated mistake historically, how people in the universe started serving idols. Now, for starters, originally in Jewish history, it's recorded, and we'll read soon, that in the beginning of creation, Adam and Noah, when they wanted to talk, they would talk to God. They knew that God existed. They knew that God was creator. What happened was, over time, people started seeing, well, God doesn't just run the world directly. He has all sort of celestial beings. He has the sun, the moon, constellations, and God runs the world with those. It's called nature. God runs the universe with nature. Nature isn't, running on its own, but God runs it. Over time, though, false prophets came out and said, by the way, if you offer more sacrifice to the sun, he'll give you more. If you offer to this constellation, if you believe in this or pray to that, these ideas, which originally were the messengers of God, they became idols for themselves. People started serving those themselves. This is what we have from the generation of Enosh. Enosh was one of Adam's sons. And what happened is eventually in that generation, people started saying, if we just recognize the messengers from God, we'll get a little ahead. And that started advancing more and more until people were full-blown idolaters, worshiping them as idols versus just appreciating them as God's conduits of running the world. Eventually, the agents of God replaced the superpower, God, right? And that's how idolatry started spreading in society. We'll read text 13. This is all from Maimonides, by the way. He goes through the whole history when he's trying to explain the importance of not being an idolater. Yes?
Well, I love the passage on page 23 where Abram went from town to town and gathered followers.
Yeah.
He was sort of proselytizing, wasn't he?
Well, he was teaching monotheism. Exactly. And that's what we need to do, right? That's the mission is not everyone has to become a Jew, but everyone has to become a Noahide. Everyone has to accept the universal values, and that's what Abraham was doing. Well, whose turn is it to read? Okay, go for it. Text 13.
Idolatrous practice spread throughout the world. People worshipped images in every possible way, offering sacrifices to them and bowing before them. After the years passed, the honored and awesome name was forgotten, and none recognized him. The entire populace, women and children included, knew nothing other than the forms of wood and stone and the temples of masonry. From the earliest youth, they were trained to bow to these images, to serve them, and to serve by their names. Even the scholars and priests among them imagined that there was no God other than the stars and the heavenly spheres, for whose sake these images had been fashioned.
So here we have what happened in history. So you get God. God has his servants, which are all the different creations which he created, which help run the universe. Then you got false prophets and idols. Then what happens is God disappears. He says the servants are God's, society serving those idols. This makes Avram's story so much more profound. Avram didn't just fight a ridiculous idea. He fought a meticulously built science where people said, hey, look, I'm receiving from God's messenger. There's no more God, it's just the messenger. And Avram taught, no, actually, these things are all just messengers of God. This frames paganism as mistaking the messenger for the king. Mistaking the power outlet for the power plant, right? Saying that what I receive from must be the origin, must be the source, must be the God. And this shows Avram's greatness, that he was able to go and dig really, really deeply and teach people, no, in fact, all these things are just the axe in the hand of the wood chopper. These are just God's messengers. So this is really great for history, but what does it mean to us? What does it mean to us? I hope nobody serves idols nowadays. Share a video.
We don't bow to idols anymore. We don't worship golden calves. But worship didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Today, we worship celebrities. If they wear it, we wear it. If they use it, we use it. We wait hours just to catch a glimpse of them. And we burn hours following every update of their lives. And the pull doesn't stop there. We also turn to money. We treat it like the end-all be-all, always wanting more, no matter how much we have. Listening to people simply because they have a lot of it. Trusting it to give us control, security, and happiness. And then there's success. We sacrifice time, health, and relationships for it. We fear losing it more than losing ourselves. We start to wonder who we are without it. So we say yes when we should say no, and we aren't there when we should be. Once bowing meant bending the knee. Now it means bending the mind. Of course, admiring talent isn't wrong. Liking things isn't wrong. Working hard isn't wrong. The real question is, what's ultimate? When God is in the picture, everything else finds its proper size.
All right, so we have 1.2 on page 26. Identify examples in today's world where people make the same fundamental error as early idolaters, placing ultimate trust, fear, or dependence on something that is merely a means or intermediary rather than the true source. Can anyone think of any examples? No? No examples? Yeah, there's lots of them. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I would say that, some of the different saints that are worshipped, I know somebody that wants to sell their house, so they buried St. Nicholas in the ground, so that it would help them sell their house. They buried, I don't think.
Well, can I think of other examples? Well, I'll give some here. These are some things that aren't God nowadays. Your boss, your doctor, money, the stock market or stockbroker, the government, your social media following, your house, the latest development of AI, the weather, the banks, the latest phone. We often think that idolatry is something, of old, paganism. But most idols nowadays, they don't stand up on pedestals. They might fit it right in your pocket. They might be in your mind and heart. They might be at your bank, right? These are the idols of nowadays. So the problem isn't having them. The problem is when these idols control our destiny, when our life revolves around them. The truth of monotheism isn't just that there's only one God. It's that there's only one God. It's that there's only one God. That's the truth of monotheism. There's no other forces in the world which control the world besides God. That's what monotheism really is. That's what Abraham was teaching them. Abraham was teaching them that when you're in the world and there's all these forces going and running lives, which we trust, which make us feel secure, we remind ourselves that those are just details in the world. But God is really behind. God's mission and his destiny is really behind everything. We need to give credit to the source and not the light bulb. We need to give credit to the origin, which is God, and not what we see. Real monotheism isn't abstract theology. It's having a relationship with God and knowing that everything we have connects with God. We're going to do a little exercise and take a few minutes. We're going to take a few minutes on page 26 to write down any thoughts and feelings that come to mind. Don't rush. And what is my idol of choice? I don't think there's anyone in the United States who doesn't have one to some degree. And what would life change without one power? Would my life change if I internalized the idea there's only one God, only one power, and everything in life is a tool, an intermediary, a blessing from him? Now, I want to mention, the reason why I said I don't think anyone doesn't have one thing is because I really believe that the world, everything's interconnected in the world. And when you want change elsewhere, it's really easy to call out other people and say, oh, you did this wrong, or you believe in idols, or whatever it is. But the truth is, the way to change them is we all have subtle degrees, because these are commandments to us, where we rely on things a little bit too much, and we say this is a little bit too godly, right? This has a little bit more force than it actually does. I know so many people who, in America, in the American dream, I was talking about this 100 years ago, nobody had savings. Nobody had savings. People didn't live in that lifestyle. Very, very few. Maybe if you were a king, you had your reserve, but no one had savings. Nowadays, people feel they're going to die if they don't have savings. They give them 5 minutes, they're dead, right? These are little things in our society which are slightly, now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have savings, but don't rely on it too much. You got to know the proper context. So we'll take a couple minutes. We'll take 3 minutes to do this exercise on page 26. So again, question number 1, what is my idol of choice? Something specific in my life that I rely on more than I should? How would my life change if I internalized the idea there's only one God, only one power, and everything else in life is a tool, an intermediary, or a blessing from Him? All right, we're going to finish. Anyone want to comment? Any ideas they could share? I know it's vulnerable. It's always easy to get your friend to point it out, right? Yeah, Natalie.
I put out a big list: writers, movie stars, people in the art world, poets, singers, musicians, and wise orators.
All right, anyone else want to share?
Politicians.
Politicians, in society, we rely a lot on the government, right? We rely a lot on the government, but actually they have zero control, right? God's in charge. God's in charge, right? Anyone else want to share something? All right, we're going to go on now. So this is, just to summarize, this is a really deep idea of Abraham. Abraham wasn't just crushing physical idols. He wasn't just crushing what they call in Hebrew, eitzim va'avanim. He wasn't just crushing wood and stone. He was crushing the idea that everything, God is behind everything. He was crushing the idea that there are things beyond God's reach. There are things that control the world beyond God's reach. But in truth, God is behind everything, and everything is just messengers from God. Well, now we'll take it a step further. Having a lot of gods means having a lot of chaos. And anxiety. So we'll read 14a. Where are we holding 14a? Yes, 14a.
There were many gods. They fought, struggled, and established hierarchies of dominance, slowly establishing order out of chaos. We have many records of these ancient times, and through the names of the gods change, depending on whether we speak of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Canaan, or ancient Greece. The stories are remarkably similar. The god of the sky does battle with the god of the sea, and out of the victory establishes dry land, usually over the dead body of his slain victim. The god of the lightning and rain impregnates the goddessness of the earth, and thus crops grow and the land brings forth its produce. The ancient world was one in which order was consequently threatened by chaos or times in the form of floods and droughts. At others, by war from invading tribes. Through the stories they told, they explained to themselves why this is so. Disturbances here refer more ultimate struggles elsewhere between the gods.
So having a lot of gods creates a lot of chaos. And that's what we find in the idolatrous cultures. There is always anger and jealousy, people offending the wrong God by doing the wrong thing, causing another God to go and rebel and get vengeance. Life became constantly anxious with these negotiations of multiple gods trying to drive the driver's seat. Now let's contrast that with monotheism. Text 14b.
The account of creation in the first chapter of Genesis is stunningly original, quite unlike any other in antiquity. There are no contending forces, no battles of the gods, no capricious spirits. God speaks and the universe comes into being. God is not in nature but above it, transcending it and ordering it according to his word. Nature has no will or set of wills of its own.
So Avram's discovery brought unison to the universe. It brought calmness. There's one God behind everything, and he's in control of everything. Humanity knew, and we can trust him rather than fear that we might anger the wrong God. Ancient people, they worshiped visible powers. They worshiped the rain, the sun, the moon, all sorts of different ideas. People nowadays also worship visible powers. If somebody thinks healing comes from their doctor and not from God, they're also worshiping a visible power. If somebody feels security comes from finances or working hard, they're also worshiping visible false gods. What Abraham did is he said, no, everything is one relationship with one God who's above everything. King David actually expresses this. Now, when you have that stable relationship, suddenly there's safety in your life. Suddenly there's confidence in your life. You know God's got your back. So here we have a famous psalm from King David. Some of you might know it. Page 15.
A song by David. God is my shepherd, I will not lack. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Even when I walk in the valley of death's shadow, I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
So indeed, Jewish people, the beginning of every week, at the end of Shabbat, they say a certain prayer. It's called Havdalah. And here's what we say in the prayer. Text 16.
Indeed, God is my deliverance. I am confident and I will not be afraid. For God is my strength and my song, and he has been my salvation.
So ancient idolatry brought a world of fear and a world of anxiety. But when somebody knows that God always has their back and God is always there and he's actually the one in control of everything, suddenly they know that that's who to speak to. That's the one to speak to. That's the one to rely on. Now with this we can understand something very interesting. One of the Noahide laws is you're not allowed to curse God. You're not allowed to curse God. Now at first, what, is God a baby? He's afraid of us cursing him, right? It seems like it's somewhat insignificant. Cursing God seems like it'd be a minor offense, right? I mean, God can't take the heat. I didn't destroy property. I didn't steal. I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't hurt finite beings who that's all they have. I said it to God. What, is God so hurt? It's not just about this disrespectful language. Cursing God is really recognizing that there's not a purpose in the world. When you curse God, you're saying God's not in charge. He's not running this universe. He is not in full control. When you curse God, you're acknowledging that God is not the one in charge. God is not the one. God does bad things, and he's not the one in charge, and he's not fully righteous, and he's not the proper judge. There's really more than that to it. It's not enough to just believe there's a God. But you have to know that there's one God, and he's not in it to get something. He's not in it to cheat people. He's not in it to hurt people. He's creating judgment. He's creating proper judgment in the world. He's benevolent. He's creating ethics in the world. He's creating goodness in the world. Sometimes we don't see God's goodness. Sometimes we don't understand it. But we still believe it's there. And we believe there's more to the picture. And this is why we don't curse God, because it's not enough to just believe that God exists. It's not enough just to be a believer. But we also need to acknowledge that God is controlling the world, and God is just, and God has values. And God always does the right thing. He has no other interest. Other gods in the olden days, they had other interests. I mean, they would fight with each other and, they would fight with each other and do all sorts of malice. But God, in fact, is benevolent, and he's creating a world with a good society where he can be present. So this is the idea of, it's actually in Hebrew, we don't even call it cursing God. We don't even say that word. We call it Birchas Hashem. The rabbis would say it's called blessing God, because they didn't want to say the word curse next to God, right, in Jewish law. So this is the belief of God is more than just knowing there's a God, more than just, it's knowing that there's one God. And knowing that there's one God is more than saying, there's one force. It's knowing that God is the only force, the only true force behind everything in the world. And not only that, he's benevolent. He's the singular vein of righteousness and purpose in the world. Everything revolves around the purpose that he puts into the world. Any questions? These are kind of deep concepts, so we're kind of going through them kind of fast. Any questions? Questions. Okay. So, this is why the Torah emphasizes. Now, let's take it another way. Atheism denies the existence of God. When somebody curses God, at least they believe in him, right? At least they believe in God. They acknowledge his existence. However, when you curse God, you're not acknowledging that God is present in the world and putting righteousness into the world, putting goodness into the world. And part of living in this universe and doing good in this universe is knowing that God is good and he's giving good and he's benevolent. This is what the verse says in the Psalms, 17a. Natalie, 17a.
Righteous and benevolent. God is good to all, and his compassion is upon all his creations. God is righteous in all his ways and benevolent in all his deeds.
So this is from King David. Next, Ed, 17b.
For your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, who shows no favoritism and takes no bribes. He carries out justice for the orphan and the widow, and he loves the stranger, giving them bread and clothing.
So is God omnipotent? Yes. However, at the same time, God is just. God is benevolent. He sides with the widows and the orphans. And when we curse God, we might be admitting God is omnipotent, but we're forgetting that the purpose of this world is for God's goodness and for us to do good as well. And this is why this denial, when we curse God, is not just an emotion, it's not just a feeling, but it's actually a crack in what our mission is in the universe. When we know God is benevolent and he gives us, it makes us want to give. When we know God is just, it makes us look forward and say, we need to be just. This is a just world. If God is omnipotent, but he's not just, well, then we better fight for ourselves, right? We better fight for ourselves, because otherwise we're going to fall behind. But if God is just, and he'll always make sure the universe is just, then we'll act justly, and we'll remember there's a God, and we'll give God to the world. So ultimately, a monotheistic view is only possible when we trust and we know that God is benevolent, he's just, and he stands behind everything. And that is what Abraham, our forefather, wanted to view into the world. So now let's tie it together. We started off the course talking about how, on one hand, Judaism is quite insular and private. And then we went back to the story of Noach, Abraham's monotheism, and we talked about how the Torah and Judaism has a framework for all humanity. And it starts with the first mitzvah of believing in God and not cursing him. This understanding will give us more insight in what it means Jewish people are the chosen people. What chosen people? We know in the Torah God calls us the chosen people. And on the commentary on that verse, we have the Seforno. Now, the Seforno was a famous rabbi in the 15th century. Some of you might remember we actually had a whole lesson about him. He was a philosopher who was tied to a certain priest in the old country who was able to go and turn over the mandate against Jewish people, destroying their libraries, and against Jewish communities in Europe. So here's what he says about the verse in the Torah. God calls the Jewish people my kingdom of priests. If you want to read text 18.
you will be for me a kingdom of priests. You will be unique. You will be a unique treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests whose mission is to guide and teach the entire human race to call upon the name of God and to serve him with one purpose.
So here we have the Sforno explains, what is a kingdom of priests? What does it mean, kingdom of priests? As Jewish people have the responsibility to teach others. And that's what God chooses the Jewish people for. He loads them up with all these mitzvahs and a special connection. And then he says, go light up the world. And this is the verse in Isaiah, text 19a.
I, God, have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you. And I will set you as a covenant for all people and a light unto all nations.
So we talk about a light unto the nations, and people think of Einstein or other people who have given Jews, thank God, there's a lot of talented ones, but the Radak actually explains the light unto the nations. Radak was a famous rabbi in the 18th century. He explains that a light unto the nation is a nation that teaches people of the universal laws of Noah. And that's the job. That's the job of the Jewish people universally, as the chosen people, as priests, to teach these universal laws to the universe, to everybody, that everyone should believe in God and know that he's there behind everything, and have that level of monotheism which Abraham wanted to teach the world. So this is a light unto the nations, means connecting all people to God through God's commandments to humanity. So monotheism, for today, as we see, it creates clarity and order. It gives trust to the world that there's a benevolent creator who exists in this world and is behind everything. And when we all believe that, we'll have those unifying idea of God, and we'll want to be benevolent and righteous as well. And this is one of the core beliefs which is meant to shape the moral standard of the world. So we'll just finish off with exercise 1.3. Page 35, imagine yourself as Abraham, standing at the forefront of a new universal mission. Write a personal letter to your current self, his physical and or spiritual heir, offering an empowering message for your journey ahead. All right, well, this is your homework. You don't have to share that here, or if you want, you could. This is I hope you enjoyed the end of today's lesson. Does anyone have any questions before we do the summary? Anyone have any questions?
Say that again.
Anyone have any questions before we're going to do a summary video? But does anyone have any questions questions on today's lesson? All right, well, I recommend there's an appendix at each lesson, which has really good stuff. That's good to read at home. And, I don't always mention it, but they always bring really good sources. And here's the lesson summary.
The message of Abraham. 1. Judaism appears exclusive because the Torah frames the Jewish people as a distinct nation with a unique covenant. Yet this separateness is only part of the picture. The story of Abraham shows that Judaism includes a universal moral mission for all humanity. 2. Abraham differed from Noah by caring about the fate of all people, not only his own family. His bold advocacy for Sodom reveals that Judaism begins with care for the world, not isolation. 3. God chose Abraham because he taught others to live by righteousness and justice and the values contained in the 7 Noahide laws. Jews are commanded to teach these laws, and anyone who observes them earns the title righteous among the nations, with a share in the world to come. 4. Monotheism, the first of the 7 laws, revolutionized human thought by replacing a chaotic world of competing forces with one creator and one coherent moral order. Modern materialism repeats ancient errors by attributing power to intermediaries rather than the true source. 5. Cursing God, the second of the 7 laws, is prohibited because it undermines the core of monotheism. It denies God's goodness, collapsing the trust on which a meaningful, ordered universe depends. 6. Chosenness is not about superiority, but responsibility. The Jewish mission is to safeguard and share a universal moral framework for all humankind.
So lesson 2 will be next week. We'll see you same time next week. Is morality obvious? You can probably guess it's not such a simple answer, yes or no. We're going to do that next week, and I hope you enjoyed today. If you have any questions, you can ask them now, or you can ask them privately. Email them. Yes, question?
Is this considered the Jewish Orthodox phase of it versus, you and I had talked about the, like Dr. Hess?
So these classes that we're teaching here are originating in 4,000-year-old Jewish tradition. That's what we teach here. We believe that Judaism is better unchanged, and it's been around for 4,000 years, and we don't change it, and we keep the tradition going. So the lessons you teach here, any source that we bring here, unless we're trying to, maybe show devil's advocate, any source that we bring here from a rabbi will be from a rabbi who is on the chain of Jewish tradition, meaning unchanging Jewish tradition for the last 4,000 years. So I want to say yes, but I'll tell you why I'm hesitant. You know when Orthodox Judaism was created? Anyone know?
It's pretty modern.
Orthodox Judaism is about 200 years old, because before 200 years ago, it was just called Judaism. It was called Judaism. No one called it Orthodox. There was only one form of traditional Judaism. 200 years ago, when other forms of more modern Judaism came about, Reform and conservative, then people said, oh, well, the old way is